Level 1 begins. Tarai. You are 18 years old. You circle the Shayetet 13 box on your military draft notice. Most other conscripts leave that box blank and skip it. A cousin once mentioned the name Shayetet 13. Immediately after saying the name, your cousin falls completely silent about it. That silence makes you realize how serious and secretive the unit is. The narration explains that the Gibush selection takes place only 4 days at a time. The narration explains that the Gibush is held only twice each year. You arrive at the selection site before dawn. Nearly 300 other candidates arrive alongside you. The Mediterranean Sea stretches out beside the selection area. The sea is dark, almost completely black before sunrise. Cold air blows in from the water. The smell of diesel fuel mixes with the scent of salt water. An officer gathers everyone together. The officer tells the candidates that most of them will not still be there on the 4th day. The officer adds that it is not a prediction. The selection exercise begins. You and the other candidates lift a 150-kilogram Zodiac boat. The team carries the heavy Zodiac through the sand dunes. The movement takes place in complete darkness. The carrying straps dig deeply into your shoulders. The pain begins before the first kilometer is even finished. The narration explains how quitting follows a specific ritual. A candidate who quits places his helmet on the ground. The candidate leaves without saying a single word. The second day of the Gibush arrives. By the end of day 2, around 90 candidates have already quit. The 3rd night begins. Candidates stand chest deep in cold seawater. The water temperature is approximately 16 degrees Celsius. Everyone remains in the freezing water for 2 hours. Your legs begin cramping from the cold and exhaustion. Despite the pain, nobody raises a hand to quit. The 4th day finally arrives. You enter a small interview room. The room smells of dried salt left behind by wet uniforms. An interviewer asks what you do when you don't know what to do. You answer honestly, without trying to impress anyone. An officer walks toward you. The officer stops directly in front of you. The officer simply says, Monday, 0600. You leave the selection center. You drive home. Your family asks how the selection went. You simply reply, fine. The narration explains that there are still no words to describe what happened. Level 2 begins. Rav Tarai. You are still 18 years old. You begin Course Lochamim. The narration explains that Course Lochamim lasts 20 months. The narration explains that it is one of the longest training pipelines in the IDF. The first 6 months are spent in infantry training alongside the Naval Brigade. You train shoulder to shoulder with Naval Brigade soldiers. Your instructors have personally experienced the drills they now teach. They demonstrate every exercise with confidence born from real operational experience. The demanding daily training routine continues. By the 5th month, your rank changes to corporal. The promotion happens automatically under military policy. The narration explains that the promotion recognizes nothing that policy itself can truly measure. You continue proving yourself through performance rather than rank. Month 7 begins. Parachute training starts. You receive instruction in maritime operations. You begin learning demolitions. You board an aircraft for your first solo parachute jump. The aircraft reaches jump altitude. You stand alone at the open aircraft door. You leap from the aircraft for the first time. The rushing air slams into you like a solid wall. You stabilize yourself beneath the parachute. Training continues with jumps toward the sea. You complete a daylight water jump. Later, you perform another jump in complete darkness. A demanding nighttime swim exercise begins. You swim through the open sea with the rest of the trainees. A trainee beside you signals that he is in distress. The emergency occurs approximately 2 kilometers from shore. You remain calm despite the situation. You assist the struggling trainee. You safely bring him back toward shore. The instructor observes everything. The instructor tells you that your actions were not impressive. Instead, the instructor says your actions were simply correct. The narration explains that correct is the standard expected of every operator. Level 3 begins. Samal, you are now 19 years old. 18 months of training have passed. You now hold the rank of sergeant. The narration explains that the weight of responsibility now matches your rank. You begin closed-circuit rebreather diving training. The narration explains that the rebreather produces no bubbles. The narration explains that it leaves virtually no trace underwater. You descend into black water. Visibility drops to nearly zero. Your diving partner keeps one hand on your forearm for guidance. The dive reaches a depth of 22 meters. Your partner's rebreather suddenly fails. The underwater emergency begins. Neither of you panics. The countless hours of training take over through pure reflex. You immediately share your air supply with your partner. You carefully control the ascent. The two of you continue rising together. You safely surface approximately 2 kilometers from shore. Both of you remain completely silent for several minutes. The instructor records what happened. The instructor offers no praise. The narration explains that your response met only the minimum expected standard. Several weeks later, you begin training at the counterterrorism school. You learn vessel boarding sequences. You practice approaching targets from the water. You train to clear a ship beginning at the waterline. The clearing exercise continues upward through the vessel. The narration explains that a perfectly executed operation should never become news. The unit begins assigning trainees to specialized palgas. Each trainee undergoes assessment before assignment. You are evaluated for the assault specialization. You are selected for the assault palga. A small graduation ceremony is held at Atlit. You stand with the other newly qualified operators. You receive the unit's dark beret. You were presented with the Batwing insignia. The unit's motto is introduced. The narration explains, as the bat emerges from darkness, the narration completes the motto, as the blade cuts with silence. Level 4 begins. Samal Rishon. You are now 20 years old. Your first operational tasking arrives. There is no ceremony or celebration. 7 operators gather around a table. Mission coordinates are presented using designation codes. The objective is to board a vessel suspected of carrying weapons components. The team begins preparing for the mission. The operation starts at 0200 hours. 2-meter swells rock the sea. The boat moves forward with its engine at minimum throttle. No one speaks during the approach. Every operator remains completely focused. The assault team reaches the target vessel. The boarding operation begins. The team moves quickly and methodically onto the vessel. The entire boarding takes 11 minutes. No resistance is encountered. The team secures the vessel. The cargo hold is inspected. The hold contains exactly what intelligence predicted. The mission objective is successfully confirmed. The narration explains that you feel the weight of procedure rather than excitement. The operation concludes. A formal debrief begins. The debrief lasts 3 hours. You silently recognize that 2 of your decisions were incorrect. You know your mistakes before anyone points them out. Your commander slides a blank notepad across the table. He instructs you to write your own debrief. You begin documenting your own mistakes and decisions. The narration explains that you will repeat this process after every operation for the next 2 years. More operational missions follow. The missions occur at irregular intervals. The narration explains that the outside world will never hear about them. One mission sends your team to a designated location. The team waits for hours. The operation stretches to 6 hours. The target never appears. The mission is officially aborted. The team returns without completing the objective. A final review of the operation takes place. Your team leader quietly closes the mission folder. He confirms that every operator returned safely. The narration concludes that bringing every man home is the true mission. Level 5 begins. Rav Samal. You are now 23 years old. You become a career non-commissioned officer. You are assigned as a team leader. Your new role is Mefekid Sevet. Your commander calls you into his office. 4 personnel files are placed on your desk. Your commander tells you, don't lose them. The narration explains that he means both during operations and throughout every quiet month of preparation. You accept responsibility for the 4 operators under your command. Leadership becomes your primary mission. You begin learning the personalities of each team member. You discover that leadership is often about reading pressure rather than giving orders. You learn to recognize who performs best in silence. You learn to recognize who needs encouragement from your voice. You adjust your leadership style to each individual operator. A reconnaissance insertion mission is assigned. Your team begins the maritime approach. Sea conditions worsen during the insertion. The swells rise higher than mission planners predicted. The team continues pushing through the rough water. 2 operators begin showing early signs of hypothermia. They remain capable of continuing the mission. You realize they may no longer be fully effective at the target. The narration explains that compromised operators are where critical mistakes begin. You quickly assess the risks. You decide the mission should not continue. You order the operation to abort. The team immediately follows your decision. Every operator withdraws safely from the mission area. The team returns to base. A formal debrief is conducted. Your commander reviews your decision to abort. He offers only one piece of feedback. He says, call it 1 kilometer earlier next time. You quietly absorb the lesson that good leadership means recognizing danger before it becomes irreversible. Level 6 begins. Saren. You are now 26 years old. You begin the officer's course. The narration explains that the course lasts 3 months. Every Shayetet officer is required to complete it. There are no exceptions, regardless of previous experience or achievements. You commit yourself to the course, despite everything you have already proven. The training focuses on leadership at the officer level. You complete the officer's course. You return to Athlete. You return with the rank of platoon commander. You begin leading multiple teams instead of a single one. You observe the Rav Samols under your command. You recognize the same instincts they display. The narration explains that they are the exact instincts you had 2 years earlier. You guide your team leaders through the same lessons you once learned yourself. A counter-terrorism operation is assigned. The mission takes place in coastal terrain. The operation begins at 2:30 hours. 3 separate operational elements move into position. The mission depends on a narrow, time-critical window. Events begin unfolding rapidly. Within 3 minutes, you make 5 critical decisions. Each decision immediately affects the operation. The mission concludes. You return from the operation. You open a private notebook. You spread a map out in front of you. You carefully mark each of your 5 decisions on the map. No one else ever sees this notebook. The narration explains that it exists to record what you owe to your own honesty. The narration concludes that some lessons belong in official reports, while others belong only to yourself. Level 7 begins. Rav Saren. You are now 30 years old. You assume command of the Assault Palaga. 60 operators now serve under your command. 3 platoon commanders report directly to you. The narration explains that those platoon commanders were recently in the same position you once held. Your responsibilities expand beyond leading missions. You become responsible for developing future leaders. A maritime boarding operation is assigned. Mission planning begins. The planning process continues for 3 weeks. Every detail of the operation is reviewed repeatedly. 14 operators are selected for the mission. The assault force is organized into 2 Zodiac boats. The team completes final mission preparations. The operation begins at 1:30 hours. The 2 Zodiacs move quietly across the water. The assault force approaches the target vessel. The boarding operation begins. The team secures the vessel. The cargo hold is searched. The hold contains exactly what intelligence predicted. The mission objective is successfully confirmed.
The operation concludes without casualties. Every operator returns safely. A formal debrief begins. Your officers gather to review the mission. You address the platoon commanders. You explain that a plan is not automatically good simply because the intelligence proved correct. Your officers listen carefully. You emphasize that reliable plans must survive unexpected changes. The narration concludes that you want plans capable of succeeding even when the intelligence is wrong.
Level 8 begins. Scan aloof. You are now 34 years old. You assume command of a vessel squadron. Your responsibilities expand beyond leading individual operations. You become responsible for maintaining squadron readiness. You oversee operational doctrine. You take responsibility for the unit's training pipeline. Your focus gradually shifts from missions to building future operators. You transition into running Kursi Lohamim. You review the entire training program. You begin revising the diving progression. Each stage of dive training is carefully evaluated. You identify areas where decision-making can be strengthened. You design a new decision-making training block. The new training module is built from years of operational debrief patterns. Lessons learned from countless missions become part of the curriculum. New trainees begin learning under the updated program. You observe them applying the revised training. You discover a different kind of satisfaction than field operations ever provided. A squadron trained under your program is assigned an operation. The operators execute the mission with precision. The operation is completed cleanly. Recognition is given to the operators who carried out the mission. You quietly watch their success from the background. You understand what shaped their performance. The years spent refining the training pipeline made that success possible. The narration explains that the pipeline itself remains invisible to everyone outside it.
The narration concludes that this invisibility is exactly how it should be. Level 9 begins. Aloof Mishneh. You are now 44 years old. You assume command of Flotilla 13. Your appointment is never publicly announced in connection with the role. The narration explains that your name appears in no public document tied to your command. Operations continue under your leadership. Successful missions bring recognition to the unit. The operators receive the credit for every successful operation. The narration explains that failures begin with accountability at your desk. A serious training accident occurs. A candidate is injured during training. The accident immediately triggers an official review. A review board is assembled. The board examines every stage of the training exercise. A gap is discovered in a training plan you had approved. The responsibility leads directly back to you. You acknowledge the mistake without hesitation. You accept responsibility without qualification or excuse. Years pass. Your period of command comes to an end. You are promoted to Brigadier General. The narration explains that the promotion arrives at the conclusion of command, just as it did for those before you. You begin a quieter chapter of life. You choose to live near the coast. The decision is completely intentional. The sound of the sea remains a constant part of your life. The narration connects the waves to your first night standing in 16 degrees Celsius water. Memories of every dark swim return whenever you hear the Mediterranean. Your children grow up knowing only part of your career. They know you served in the Navy. They know you were part of the Special Forces. They know nothing more. Years ago, they stopped asking questions.
The narration explains that their silence comes from understanding, not indifference. One day, a journalist contacts you. The journalist requests an interview. You choose not to reply. Another quiet morning begins. You sit alone on your porch before sunrise. The Mediterranean stretches out before you once again. The first light of dawn reaches the water. You reflect on the decades behind you. The narration explains that you finally understand something fundamental. The world's best operators were never unknown by accident. Their anonymity was part of their purpose. You realize you never climbed the ranks for recognition. Every promotion carried you further away from public attention. Your purpose was always the work itself. The narration explains that you disappeared completely into that work. The story concludes with the realization that you accomplished exactly what you set out to do.